Welcome, everyone. I'm Denise O'Malley, the founder of You Define Wellness, and this is our monthly Conversations in the Workplace featuring Lori Reichel Howe, the owner of Conversations in the Workplace. Every single month, every single Tuesday in a month, we have an event for employers and employees on some aspect of workplace wellness. This one has been a very popular session because Lori's expertise in managing those conversations in the workplace is exceptional. This is a great opportunity for you to come and ask questions of her. Today, we're going to be talking about workplace conversations and not blame. She's going to go more into that, but I wanted to share her contact information with you real quick. And we will show it again at the end of all of this. And with that being said, let me introduce the incomparable Lori Reichel Howe. Lori, I'm turning it over to you.
Oh, well, thank you. And what I will do, I will pull up my PowerPoint. So I want you to not only see me, but I want you to see the slides. And thank you so much. I look forward to every month being able to share my content. And I have been busy during COVID and have created today's content, creating a culture of accountability, not blame. And organizations that establish a culture of accountability, well, they do more than tell people to hold each other accountable. They train people to hold accountability conversations. So in today's webinar, I will demonstrate how to implement a communication framework that transforms finger pointing and blaming into inviting people to step up and take responsibility for finding solutions. And these type of what I'll call accountability conversations, they're critical because we all know that the workplace reality is there will be times, it's inevitable, when challenges will occur, when the ball it's going to be dropped, and when processes either break down or prove to be inadequate. And when this happens, we all experience conflict. And conflicts are a natural occurrence in every human group, in the family, in the workplace family, in organizations, in life, and even in social gatherings. And when these things happen, conflict, it's common for communication to break down, for defensiveness to erupt, and for progress to halt. So when members of a team like this one have the skill to describe problems without blaming and attacking, they are able to discover underlying causes, to establish responsibility, who needs to take responsibility, and to then secure ownership from individuals in moving forward to problem solve. Now, sadly, but inevitably, we live in a society that has blurred the lines between accountability and blame. In fact, many people, including organizational leaders, use these words, accountability and blame, interchangeably. They do not understand the difference. They even think blaming people is part of their doing their job and holding people accountable. But it's how we hold people accountable that matters, and that defines a good leader as well as a culture of accountability. So with that, I'd love to get some engagement here. I'd love to check in with all of you to hear from you in the chat box. Tell me how prevalent is blame in your organization. Now, based upon your experiences, issues, and concerns, always escalate to HR. How often does blame occur within your organization? And is it never, you can put a N or never in the chat box. Does it occur occasionally? Does it occur regularly? Or does it occur, it's never ending? And so if you would go to your chat box, I'd love to hear from you, from your experiences in your organization.
Oh my, we had a few in a row of never ending, never ending, never ending, but then, oh, and more never ending. And then we have some never, and we do have some occasional.
Oh, okay. Okay. So it's very much relevant. And when blame occurs, usually people are not skilled in holding accountability conversations. So, okay, thank you. I wanted to make sure my content was relevant, and I think we just got a heads up to move on to identify that, and um, it just validates the need. So, as I mentioned earlier, we live in a society that has blurred the lines between accountability and blame. And leaders who don't distinguish between the two are laying a groundwork for a toxic culture where people blame, and when they blame, they toss people under the bus. They run over them with the bus, and afterwards they declare themselves innocent in attacking a co-worker. So when people blame, they accuse and judge others, and they appoint themselves as a judge, jury, prosecutor. And here's the problem with blame: abdicating any responsibility on their part. Whenever we judge, we diminish the humanity of others. So go back to your chat box. I'd love to hear some examples of blame. Blame that you've either experienced, or blame that in your position you find complaints about blame examples coming to you. I'd love to hear some of those examples, and here's a few that I have recognized. Just some blame sounds like. So go to your chat box, put in your example of blame, and I will continue to just list a few that I have. Because the accounting department didn't, so what somebody didn't do, if you would have, this wouldn't have happened. It's all your fault. There's just that blanket statement that we hear all the time. Your refusal to hold your team accountable cost us this project. That one we will model today. So Denise, can you read to me some of the examples that have been placed in the chat box?
Well, we're still waiting for some, but mine in there was, you didn't send me the link to the meeting for me to give my input.
Oh, okay. And you can recognize blame because it typically starts with the word you.
Oh, here's another one. You didn't remind me.
Oh, wow. Okay. Oh,
How about, why does your team never notify us when an account is going to go live?
whoa. And notice the never. It's so
Yeah.
dangerous to use the words never and always. And quite often, if there's just one example when somebody has done it, they it's like it turns somebody into a liar. So
We
they
have
are.
we have
They
two
are.
others that are really good, and I want to get them in here. This
Okay.
isn't my job, and so didn't do it, so now I have to do it.
Wow. Okay.
And the other one was, how was I supposed to know? Nobody told me.
Wow. Okay. Everybody's responsible for me. Wow. Great examples. Okay. I'm so glad we're recording because I'm going to write these down. And this would be brilliant as far as how to practice responding in those particular situations. Okay. Great examples. Thank you, everyone. And also fabulous engagement. It just excites me, and I think it just adds such a richness and relevance to the content. So now, given those examples, let me demonstrate how to implement a communication framework that transforms blame into taking responsibility for finding solution. And there are two ways to transform blame. And Denise and I plan to give some examples demonstrating how to use each of these ways of transforming blame. The first one is how to reframe blame to taking responsibility. And that is, and the second way, which we'll do afterwards, is reframe blame by identifying contribution. So let's look at reframing blame to responsibility. And you want to do this when you see that you believe someone is stuck in blame. Some of your examples that you shared were definite examples of that. Signs of being stuck in blame are when people are unable to see action steps they can take. They instead see themselves as the victim. They can only see the problem, and usually that problem is somebody else, and they cannot see solutions or steps that they can take to move things forward or see any contribution that they've had. Their complete focus is on what other people, here we go, you needed to remind me, complete focus on what other people either are doing, are not doing, what they need to do, or what they should have done. So the finger is completely pointed to someone else. They are the victim, and they see themselves held hostage. When we blame, we take on a victim mentality and we abdicate any responsibility on our part, along with our power to influence needed change. So let's listen to a conversation where a manager reframes blame to taking responsibility and helps a team member to discover she is not a victim and that there are things she can do to move the process forward. So, and this is where Denise and I are going to play the roles. Olivia on the left, Denise is going to play, and she is going to tell her manager, Sophie, which I will play on the right, that a project is stalled because accounting department has not provided a requested cost estimate for onboarding 2 employees. Now watch how Sophie, the manager that I'll play, implements my safe conversation communication framework to get Olivia to move the project forward. And here is the framework that Sophie will be implementing. Smack dab in the center, she is going to summarize what the concerns were of Olivia. Now she's going to recognize her challenge. She wants Olivia to know she's heard her concern. But acknowledging does not mean you agree with blaming. And while you can acknowledge someone's challenge, that doesn't dismiss their responsibility to move forward to find a solution. So she will acknowledge, not dismiss. And then what she will do is talk about the negative consequences that she wants Olivia to avoid. I don't want you to get stuck, to not be successful, missing a deadline. And in doing that, you build a sense of, hey, let's look at this situation. I want to help you move forward. I want you to avoid these consequences. And she will make it clear responsibility to respond. While someone may not be at fault for what happened or someone's unresponsiveness, they still are responsible to respond in a way that helps find solutions. So and then what we will do is ask questions to get Olivia to brainstorm solutions and steps she can take, and then watch how Sophie gets her to give an agreement moving forward. We're not just going to talk about this, but I want a commitment. This is important because managers, this is about performance. So here we go. Denise will be playing Olivia, and I will start playing Sophie. And like any good manager, I am going to check in. No one wants a manager who the only time they communicate to them is when they have a project due. Managers need to be available on a regular base, and they need to be doing check-ins, because when problems arise, the sooner you address those, the sooner we can find solutions, and also preventing problems from escalating. So checking in. Hey, Olivia, I wanted to check in and hear how the project bid is progressing.
Well, the project is at a complete standstill thanks to the accounting department. I've repeatedly requested a staffing budget and they have ignored every one of my emails.
Okay. Can you wash your face before you put your head on the pillow? Got
Ooh.
chocolate all over it.
Oh, whoops, we need somebody to silence.
Working.
Okay, so I've checked in. We've had an example of blame. Now Sophie's going to acknowledge, hey, I recognize that it's frustrating when people are unresponsive to emails. I don't want you to get stuck waiting on others to respond and miss your deadline.
Once again, I can't control accounting or make them respond to my email requests to turn in data on time.
While non-responsiveness to your email requests may not be your fault, and I know it's frustrating, it is your responsibility, Olivia, to explore solutions to problems so that you can complete this bid. Since you haven't received a response from your emails, I expect you to consider different steps you could take to get the needed information. Let's explore some options. Okay, think about what kind of questions can Sophie ask Olivia? And I would love to, I would love to give you just a moment. Think about what kind of questions could she ask? What we want is for Olivia to think about actions she can take versus having Sophie tell her what she could do. Now, here's a few questions that I've crafted. Are there different ways to communicate that may be more effective than email? Another question, is there anything you can provide to the accounting department that would help them along? Is it possible she's not given them enough information, context? It's possible she's emailing someone who's even on vacation. And is the accounting department the only budget avenue? Do you need an exact number or do you need an estimate? And go to the chat box and tell me, what kind of questions might you have asked? I'd love to hear a few of you and hear your thoughts.
So we've got a great one. If you're in person, go to the department in person if you can. Another one is, have you tried calling the accounting department?
Okay. See, other types of communication. And adding to those, it's so easy to overlook an email, but a dialogue is not, it's not so easy to overlook. Okay, great questions. When, as we did continue to discuss, or Olivia and Sophie, what Sophie discovered that the only number that Olivia needed to complete the project was to get the onboarding cost of 2 employees. Well, at that point, some questions that Sophie asked her, well, our past bids, could you get information from those? Would the HR department be helpful? Can you even Google and research, do a search to find out what is the average onboarding cost? And then does it need to be exact or estimate? Now, see how in asking these questions, what you are doing is helping Olivia to begin to think these questions on her own. And this is where a manager steps in and really does some apprenticing. So important in a manager's role with employees, helping them to overcome even the obstacles in their own thinking. We have a tendency to blame when we feel stuck, when our goals are being blocked, and when we have unmet needs. What we need, we are not getting it. But how do we move from blaming to looking for possible solutions? So let me move on. Now, before, oh, and I am still hearing some feedback. So I'm going to have everybody check and see if you need to mute your mic.
I've muted everyone.
Oh, great. Okay, agreement moving forward. Watch how Sophie gets agreement. What steps are you willing to take to move this project forward? They brainstormed a lot of ideas. She's asked a lot of questions, but now what she wants is a commitment. And she does it through this question. What steps are you willing to take moving forward? And then she says, okay, I will check in and I want you to know once you've made those steps. So with that, I want you to hear more than my voice. Tell me, I'd love to hear from you some thoughts and reflections that you might have in regards to what we have just the example. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to change the view so that I would love to have the gallery view. And I would, instead of chatting, would someone, I'd love to hear some thoughts and reflections on this conversation. And now, Denise, can they unmute themselves or do you have to do that?
They can unmute themselves.
Okay, fabulous.
Anybody want to speak up and talk about this? Well, I have a thought to get the ball rolling. And, this is just a perfect scenario where it's proof that we rely too much on email, the impersonal form of communication. You cannot talk about tone. You cannot, it's so easy for blame to be assigned when you're using just email for communication.
Yeah, voice, tone, and so much, I think it's like 96% is, it's not words, it's visual. And how do you dialogue with email? So just when clarity is needed, making sure you're having a conversation. And of course, it's nice when it's in person, but even screen to screen is far more effective. There are so many more verbal, visual clues. And what I found, and HR, I'd love to hear, but I have found that emails, when there's disagreement, oh my gosh, it becomes a lineup of HR infractions, and there's the evidence in the email. I call it mouse to mouse combat. So go dialogue. Either go in person or go to your screen and start with a great way is help me to understand. Tatiana, did I see a hand?
Hi, Lori.
Hello.
How do you draw a line between me being a blamer and me dealing with something that indeed is a big obstacle on my way of doing what I need to be doing?
Okay.
And if I'm asking something that you were going to talk about later, that's
okay. Tatiana, are you talking about what if it's a more complicated situation and you've got to figure out exactly what's happened, who's contributed? It's a bigger than this example.
I think she froze.
Oh gosh. Okay, so then she probably can't hear us. Okay.
I'm just a blamer, and I come, nobody makes my life possible. And sometimes I am indeed dealing with the accounting department that is not efficient and is, so how do we kind of draw the difference?
Okay. And you won't be able to draw it without asking questions and investigating. What is hard is that takes time and people want a quick fix. But do we want a Band-Aid or do we want a surgery? So there will be steps to investigating. And what I'll do, I'll move into the second example, and that is going to show some of the steps that have to happen. And that is figuring out what happened, what didn't happen, what were the unmet needs, what's contributed to this problem, and then we need to do some brainstorming. It's hard because it's multi-step, but it's also problem solving, and it is trying to do surgery instead of Band-Aids. And I think the best skill employees, managers, leaders can use in this situation is asking quality questions. So what we'll do, Tatiana, we'll look at the example, and then what I'd like you to do is come back on and see if that gave some examples of steps that are really exploring blame, what's under it, and finding contribution. You have to figure out what's part of the problem in order to find the solution. I heard it said, I read the other day, I think it was a post, that we need to do more than pull people out of the river. We need to go upstream and find out where they're falling in the river and figure out why. So, but if people want a quick fix, you know what? That's not leadership. It's about solving problems. So anyway, let's move on. Great question. And Tatiana, you have my email. So, but please come on at the end and tell me if we have identified some steps that one can use. And let's go ahead. Here is another example of how to reframe blame, which you have to do first by exploring contribution. Once you figure out what's contributing to the problem, then you can identify responsibility moving forward. More complicated, it will take time, and you do this when problems appear more complex. It's bigger than someone needing to do something that will resolve the problem. It's when you have to get clarity on what the problem is. And it could be that there are legitimate concerns that may exist that need to be explored. Someone might say, hey, my plate is too full. And when you look at what somebody's workload is, and you see that it far exceeds what the workload of other people, you may need to do some redistribution. It also might be, if their plate is not fuller than others, it may be a problem with time management. And that is the issue that needs to be addressed. Okay, now as you can see, this looks a bit more complicated. You still, in the center, you're going to have acknowledge and communicating positive wants, what you want for this person. And you want to open up and use that because you want the person to know, hey, this isn't a lecture. I want you to be more successful. And in order to do that, we're going to figure out what happened, didn't happen, what were the unmet needs. You'll move to identifying contribution. What's helped contribute to this problem? See, blame quite often isn't just one person. And it can be far more complicated than that. You'll move to brainstorming solutions, usually by questioning, inviting conversation. And then once you've got the problem more identified, you've gained clarity, getting some agreement moving forward. So that's a lot to take in, but what Denise and I will do, we're going to give some examples of a conversation, and we'll give you a demonstration, and then we'll do some Q&A and give you time to chat. Because solving problems can be a complicated step. So with that, we're going to have Denise, if you will play Matt, and blame me, Barry.
Barry, because you refused to hold your team accountable to complete the project bid, we lost the possibility of a $100,000 project.
Okay, now I'm Barry, and believe me, I want to attack, but I'm going to use Lori's safe conversation. And so instead, watch me. I'm going to acknowledge and move to positive ones. Matt, I hear your frustration in missing the opportunity to submit a proposal for a $100,000 project. And like you, I want this company to land project bids and to succeed financially. I'd like us to work together. Let's explore what happens, what needed to happen differently so that we can pitch proposals that land us projects. Now, I'm willing to discuss what happened, identify contribution, what I've done, not done, without laying blame. May I count on you to do the same? And I did get an agreement from Matt. And so then I'm saying, Matt, give me your perspective on what happened. What did you do? What happened? Can you talk to me about that?
Yeah, sure. We located the project and I sent you an email with the project submission. And then I stopped by your office to chat, but you were not there. You were out overseeing another project.
Okay, tell me your thoughts.
You know, I know we've completed similar projects in this amount of time. I know we can do this. And this submission process appears really easy and manageable. You know, all we really need to do is revise the previous bids and get your approval so we can submit it.
Okay, thanks, Matt. Let me share my perspective and what I was envisioning and how I responded. I did read your 100,000 project overview, and I did email you right after I read that. And my thoughts were that, hey, it's really not the right time. So let's talk further on this. I did stop by your office. I wanted to talk, and you were out discussing project needs with companies seeking bids. And hey, that's your job. You were doing what you should be doing. What I didn't get to communicate to you is that I really think that we have inadequate staff to meet this project deadline. I'm aware of a number of people who are going to be on vacation very shortly, and I don't think we have the human power to pull it off. Taking on this project would put the current project, it's a $50,000 project, at risk. And it's really important that we finish this project, finish it well, because the second phase of this building project, which I want us to get, is going to be a $100,000 project. It's for their second building phase, and I want us to have that. So that's why I would table the project in light of making sure we are set up to be able to secure this project. Now, I realize we both had some unmet needs here. So let's take a look at that. What did you need from me, from this work, from this situation that you didn't receive?
You know, it would really be good if I had an understanding and awareness of what the current projects are for the entire team and the timeframes involved. And I would really love to know what your schedule is if I can get access to it. And quite frankly, I think you and I need to just have ongoing communication.
Mhm. Wise. I can see the need for all three of those. I really can. And here's what I needed. I need you to research projects. That's why I brought you on. But I'm not yet ready to have you pitch them. So I want you to find them. I want you to get some experience doing that, but hold off on the pitching. And I do understand that the project demands have absorbed my time, which I wanted to spend bringing you on board. I had really planned to do that the day one when you were here, and got pulled away. Emergency, a crisis that I had to respond to. So I recognize that need, and I want you to know that, and I want you to know why that hasn't happened. There are things that I can't control. And I do need time to onboard you. So let's talk about what we did, each of us, that contributed to this situation, and as well as if there are things that others did and didn't do. And let me start with, yeah, I brought you on, planned to onboard you, and I wasn't able to do that. Okay, what Matt, have you contributed to this situation?
In my enthusiasm for wanting to land an immediate project, I moved beyond exploring projects to exploring the projects to proposing one.
Mhm.
And quite frankly, I lacked the information and made assumptions and blamed you.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I think we were able to really get to the core of that problem. I think we both know a lot more right now of what happened, but also I think it's brought us to a place of how do we brainstorm some solutions. So now let me step out of this role play, and I'm just going to give you some bullets of what Matt and Barry were able to do to identify possible solutions moving forward, what they knew they needed. They both recognized they needed to schedule an onboarding session, but the day gets filled. And so it's really hard for them to pull away, particularly right now with Barry having some really fires to put out. So what they decided, what if we have a dinner meeting? We both need to eat. Let's pull away from the work day and the construction, and let's have this maybe during a dinner meeting. They talked about that Matt can continue to review current projects, contracts, and go ahead and create and maintain a project calendar. That is one thing that Barry wanted him to do. They would go ahead and schedule weekly project update meetings. They were going to get a time that was consistent, but they also knew that things could arise that caused it to be rescheduled. So they determined that it would be the responsibility of the person who had to have it rescheduled to, at the point that they rescheduled it, they had to propose another date so that they continued to happen and they didn't have those gaps. And Matt said he would continue focusing on finding potential projects, but ones that are 3 months out, because Barry had communicated, hey, we've got this 3 months that we are slammed. We cannot take anything on. So don't look for anything that's within the next 3 months. Okay. Lots of information there. And I'll be real honest, I was even hesitant. It's hard to tighten that up to give you the steps and to show those, because it is a multi-step. It's a multi-step process. So let me stop right now, and before I go to close and before I do Q&A, let me see if you have some thoughts and reflections. Let's see if Tatiana got some strategies of what you do when situations of blame become more complex. So go ahead, gang, feel free to speak and unmute yourself, because I think the chat boxes are going to work too well for this. I'd rather to hear and have some dialogue with you. And let me pull up speaker view. Tell you what, and Denise, I'm just seeing, I can only see both of us and 4 others. So if you see anyone who's wanting to.
I don't see any hands raised at this time.
Okay.
There is okay, Valerie has a question. You want to unmute yourself and ask?
Well, it wasn't more so a question as it is a statement. It seemed like this process obviously took a lot longer. And it was a lot more in depth. Because as you can see, one person really didn't know what the other person is thinking, or what the background is to why someone doesn't do something. But again, that's all about communication and communicating with people so that you are able to know rather than assume why they're not responding or haven't responded or haven't done. So it's always best. The lesson here is to always communicate and keep the doors of communication open prior to. But it's important to let people know what you need and what you want.
And that takes time, and that takes skills in asking the right questions. Valerie, do you think we can really solve problems without that level of communication?
No.
Okay.
You always, I mean, in a relationship at work or even in a marital relationship, you have to have the ability to communicate with each other and let people know what is going on, rather than people assume, because none of us are that prophetic that we can read people's mind.
Right. Well, and think about it. I'd love to have what and everyone, this is to anyone, what do you think the cost is when we don't have these conversations and we don't get to the root of problems? Financially, time-wise?
Frustration, divorce,
workplace culture,
joblessness.
Or people are in their jobs, they're sitting there, but how effective are they?
Right.
And burnout doesn't happen when we're solving problems. Burnout happens when we're trying unsuccessfully to solve the same problem over and over and over. And how often have we tried change management? Ineffective. Usually people will leave, they're frustrated, they're not feeling listened to. It's really frustrating when we're not getting to solutions. So any other thoughts?
Yeah, we have a question that came up that I think is interesting, that fits in here, that there are some interesting power dynamics in the workplace, specifically when it comes to upper leadership versus HR. And when it comes to the blame culture, when you're dealing with that kind of a power dynamic. So how do you deal with that?
Yeah. Well, we did an earlier webinar on managing up. And so there are some great strategies there. And let's look, going back to the framework, particularly when you are managing up, having a conversation with your direct report, a boss, a CEO, someone who has the ability to influence whether you get your paycheck or write your performance review. How are you going to have a conversation? Because when they're stuck in patterns, it is affecting you, but it's also affecting them and limiting their success. So when you bring up the issue, open up with positive wants. I want us to both be successful. And I know my success is tied with yours. If you're successful, I'm going to be more successful. And I've noticed something that I think is interrupting and limiting our success. And then try to break it down to specifically what the person is doing, talk about how it's negatively impacting the boss's success, and share your desire to help them be more successful to really solve a problem. And always return of investment, why it's good for the boss, why it's good for the company, how that's going to build trust. And also things, I have found that what people can trust people who are willing to say they made a mistake and that something can be improved.
Yeah.
So it always is, how are we navigating egos? And when somebody believes you are speaking because you want them to be successful, not because you're attacking, they are going to be much more likely to listen. So there were some real specific dialoguing verbal strategies that I listed in that earlier Managing Up webinar.
Yeah. Now you mentioned that, so let me say this for purposes of the recording. For those who are with us live, I have put a link to where you can find that recording in the chat box. But for those watching this as a recording, if you will go to youdefinewellness.com, that's YOU definewellness.com. You can see the words behind me here over my shoulder, and go to the YDW recorded and choose the occupational button. You will find all of the previous recordings with Lori, as well as other recordings that we have done in the area of workplace wellness and wellness issues, or workplace issues. So that's where you find it.
Brilliant. And what I am doing right now, I am going to the chat box and I have put in my LinkedIn profile. If you haven't connected with me on LinkedIn, because I post a lot of short videos that give examples of how to respond to blame. And a matter of fact, I have created a video series, short, I think a series of 5 short videos on blame. The first one, what is blame? How to respond. One is on quick phrases you can use to help somebody go from blame to taking responsibility. Third one is how to address blame with a coworker. Then if you're a manager, 4 and 5 give examples of how to have those conversations. So if you put your name and your email in the chat box, I will email you a link to those 5 videos. I will eventually move those into a library I'm creating that I'm going to let people subscribe to, but there will be a cost for that. And it's also going to be a follow-up resource for organizations that I train for. But put in your, please put your name and your email. I hate to just send an email and not know. So anyway, so please go ahead and do that. I will save the chat box, and then anyway, but I don't want to over email people, but if you share, I know you're open to receiving that. So let me quickly do a close. And let me close my box there. Okay, in closing, I want you to know that it is possible to reframe blame to taking responsibility. And it is the individual that can clearly identify issues without laying blame that is recognized and identified as the leader, whether they have the title or not. When organizations realize that HR will not magically communicate make communication problems go away, and they train managers, employees how to hold accountability conversations using this framework, well, they are then becoming more effective, getting to the root of problems and finding solutions. So if my content resonates with you, and if you're interested in training and coaching in safe conversations, then I'm glad to create a 30-minute time slot for you to have a safe conversation consultation. So my website is www.conversationintheworkplace. When you go there, you will see my picture, and underneath the picture is a blue Let's Talk button. When you hit on that, you can then select a time, 30-minute time slot, and that will be protected for you. I'll put you on my calendar. We'll be able to take a deep dive into your situation, a look at your training and coaching needs, and explore possibilities for you. So with that, Denise, do we have time for any Q&A?
We have very little time available.
Okay.
But what I will say is this, is for anyone who is here in the room and would like to stay beyond our closing and ask questions of Lori, she always
Great.
makes herself available for that. And that's very generous of her time. I would like to actually share, I'm going to do our closeout, and then we will come back and end the recording for anybody who wants to stay afterwards and ask questions. But I do have a few things that I want to share with you. Again, Lori already shared this, but with her contact information, but this is my version of it. And, you know, a lot of people have said to us, what does conversations in the workplace have to do with wellness? And I'm going to tell you everything in life has to do with wellness. And just introduce you to Unifying Wellness. And, you know, we're all about the 8 dimensions of wellness. What Lori fits into is absolutely occupational, it's absolutely emotional. It's all kinds of different areas. I'm going to go really fast through this. So if you're watching this as a recording, hey, there's a rewind button. You can go back and review some of these slides. If you're watching it live, I'll have the recording available for you to be able to go back to them. But Unifying Wellness is not just one thing. We have over 130 modalities in our network, and our whole goal in life is to help provide solutions for the workplace for access, affordable access to the types of services that individuals choose to define as wellness for themselves, as well as education, like with this program here. And if you would like to learn more, please reach out to me, and I would love to have a conversation with you. We cannot do things like this without having sponsorships, and this event today has been sponsored by Jade Lemonade, which specializes in toxic-free living through essential oils, the Healing Team, and Dr. Natalie Forrest. We also have a variety of companies that have sponsored us ongoing since our very beginning, and we tip our hat to them and say thank you for their sponsorship. And we do invite you to check out our other events. We have stuff going on every single week. Our workplace related ones are on Tuesdays, always at this time zone or time frame. So we invite you to learn more about them. And we're also live on Facebook every week with events on Wednesdays and Fridays, and every month we have a couple of things on Thursdays. And to learn more, we invite you to go to our website to discover these, our Facebook page or our LinkedIn page. Okay, with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and do the closeout for the recording, and then we'll answer any questions live that you might have. I just want to say thank you to all of you for taking time from your day to be with us and learn more about these really important subjects. And so thank you for being here. If you're watching the recording, thank you. Also, check out some of our other recordings out there. And Lori, thank you. I always love listening to you and hearing your wisdom and advice. And just to let everybody know, August, the second Tuesday in August, we're going to do a live coaching Q&A with Lori. So we're not having a presentation per se, right, Lori? We're going to be doing the live coaching. So bring your questions, and it's going to be a great time to take advantage of that. And with that being said, we'll end the recording for today, and I hope to see you at another one.